don't let them see me like this." The rancher opened the door, and the whole town gasped. Wild West. Jake Tiller was a man of routine. He woke up early each morning, saddled his horse, and worked the land on his small ranch just outside the sleepy town of Red Rock. Life on the ranch was simple. Dusty trails, cattle to herd, and long hours under the sun. Jake had no family, no partners. It had always been just him and the land. The quiet suited him fine. He didn't need much. Just the work, the animals, and the wide open sky. But on one chilly evening in late autumn, everything changed. Jake had just finished his chores for the day. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting a soft orange glow across the vast plains. He was looking forward to a quiet night with a mug of coffee and a good book by the fire. As he walked back to the front porch of his weathered cabin, he heard the sound of something unfamiliar, a faint humming noise in the air. He froze for a moment, straining his ears. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the usual low hum of the ranch machinery either. No, this sound was different. The hum grew louder. It wasn't just the wind anymore, but the sound of something mechanical, something that didn't belong. Jake's heart began to race. He reached the door, his hand gripping the worn handle. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He glanced toward the sky. The sound grew stronger, closer. Through the dusk he spotted something, a small shape in the sky. It moved fast, a black silhouette against the setting sun. Before Jake could process what was happening, the shape dropped from the sky and landed with a soft thud in the field behind his barn. The sound stopped. A silence fell over the ranch. Jake's instincts kicked in. He moved quickly but cautiously toward the back of the house. The only sound was the crunch of his boots on the dry ground. His mind raced. Could it be someone in trouble? A plane crash? He reached the corner of the barn and peeked around. His breath caught in his chest. There, lying on the ground near the edge of the field, was a figure. She was unconscious, her body sprawled awkwardly in the dirt. She appeared to be young, with long, dark hair tangled around her face. Her clothes were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. She wore a tight-fitting suit shimmering with strange markings. Her skin, too, was odd, pale with a faint, almost ethereal glow that Jake couldn't explain. The light of the setting sun reflected off her skin in a way that made her look almost unreal. For a moment, Jake hesitated. What was she? Where had she come from? Was she injured? He took a cautious step forward, then another. The woman didn't move. He knelt beside her, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for her pulse. It was faint, but there. His mind swirled with questions, but his first instinct was to help. He gently lifted her into his arms and carried her inside the cabin. He set her down on the couch, wrapping her in a blanket. The warmth of the fire crackled softly in the background as he watched her carefully. The woman stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment they locked eyes, and Jake's heart skipped a beat. There was something strange about her gaze, almost as if she wasn't quite human. Her eyes were a deep shade of violet, and they shimmered in the light like two glowing orbs. Where am I?" she whispered, her voice faint, foreign yet familiar at the same time. It was soft but edged with panic. Jake took a deep breath, trying to keep his calm. "You're at my ranch. You were out cold. I found you in the field." He kept his tone steady, trying to comfort her. "Are you hurt?" She sat up slowly, wincing as if every movement caused her pain. She touched her side, her fingers grazing the smooth fabric of her suit. Then she looked around, taking in the rustic cabin, the fire, the simplicity of it all. "Where are you from?" Jake asked, his voice quiet, but the question hung in the air like a weight. The woman paused, staring at her hands as if she was unsure of the answer herself. I don't know," she said, shaking her head slightly, her voice growing more urgent. "They're coming for me." Jake frowned. "Who is coming?" Before she could answer, there was a loud noise, something like a distant engine roaring. The ground beneath Jake's feet vibrated slightly. He jumped to his feet and ran to the window. A large shadow passed overhead, blocking out the moonlight. Jake squinted, but he couldn't make out the shape. It was too dark, too fast. The sound of the engine grew louder and closer. The woman in the cabin stood suddenly, her eyes wide with fear. "They found me." "They will come for you, too. You have to hide me." Jake's heart raced. He'd been a rancher all his life, but he had never been in a situation like this. Never anything so impossible. He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door and ran outside, looking to the sky. Whatever was flying overhead was now descending rapidly toward his ranch. Jake's mind raced as he quickly surveyed the land. He needed to make a decision. The woman appeared at his side. She was standing tall now, her fear replaced by something else, determination. "Please," she said, "I can't let them take me." Jake looked at her, unsure of what was happening. He had no idea what kind of trouble he was in, but one thing was clear. His life was about to change forever. Without another word, Jake nodded and started running toward the barn, the woman close behind. They would have to figure this out together or they would both be in trouble. There was no time to waste. The ranch, the quiet life Jake had known, was slipping away, and whatever was coming from the sky, whatever was hunting her, it was coming for them both. Jake could hear the hum of the ship growing louder, its dark silhouette cutting through the starry sky like a shadow. The woman beside him, still clutching the side of the barn, was staring up at the sky with wide, fearful eyes. Her body tensed as if she could sense the danger drawing closer. "They're coming," she whispered, barely audible over the low thrum of the ship's engine. "You have to help me." Jake's heart was racing. He had never imagined something like this could happen to him. The quiet life he'd worked so hard to build was unraveling in front of his eyes. He had to make a decision. "Fast. Come on, we need to move," Jake said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. He grabbed her arm and led her toward the small cabin, the only safe place he could think of. "Get inside, stay low, and keep quiet." She glanced over her shoulder at the sky again, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "They'll find me. I can't stay here much longer. If they catch me, you won't be safe either." Jake didn't have time to argue. He ushered her inside, locking the door behind them. The small cabin seemed to grow smaller with every passing second. He turned to the woman, who was now pacing nervously in front of the fire. Her eyes flickered to the windows, every movement in the shadows making her flinch. "Who are they?" Jake asked, his voice sharp. "What do they want with you?" The woman stopped pacing and turned to face him. Her eyes, those strange violet eyes, held a depth of emotion Jake couldn't quite place. "I can't explain everything," she said quietly. "But they're bounty hunters, and they're not from this world." Jake blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "Bounty hunters? From another world?" She nodded slowly. "I'm not from here either. I came from a far-off planet. I was sent on a mission, but they found me. Now they'll do anything to capture me." Jake's mind swirled with confusion. None of this made sense. He was just a rancher. This wasn't the kind of thing he dealt with. He was used to cows, not intergalactic fugitive chases. "Why are they after you?" Jake asked, taking a cautious step toward her. She hesitated. "I'm the key to something important. If they get their hands on me, they'll have access to technology that could destroy worlds." He had no idea what she meant, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes. This wasn't just some wild story. She wasn't making this up. The sound of something heavy landing outside snapped Jake out of his thoughts. His eyes darted to the window and his breath caught in his chest. A dark shape appeared in the distance, hovering just above the ground. It was a ship, sleek and metallic, unlike anything he'd ever seen before. The ship's engines hummed, sending vibrations through the walls of the cabin. "They're here," the woman whispered. Her voice was full of dread. Jake's heart raced. He had no plan, no backup. There was nothing he could do to fight this. The woman was right. Whoever these people were, they weren't human. And they weren't going to stop until they had her. "Where are they?" Jake whispered, glancing nervously out the window. "They'll be here any minute," she replied, her eyes flicking from the window to the door. She seemed to be scanning the area, listening for sounds. "We have to leave. It's the only way." Jake didn't know if he was ready to run, but he didn't have a choice. He nodded and grabbed a rifle from the rack by the door, checking that it was loaded. His fingers were shaking, but he tried to steady himself. He had no idea how he was supposed to protect her. The woman was right. If these bounty hunters wanted her, they wouldn't hesitate to tear through the town to get her. "We need to move now," the woman said urgently. "Can you take me to the back of the property? There's a way to hide from them, but we have to hurry." He was about to step outside when the woman grabbed his arm. "Wait," she said, her eyes filled with a deep concern. "They can't see me. If they do, they'll know where I am. You have to keep me hidden." Jake glanced at her, confusion still clouding his mind. "What do you mean? You've been outside before." She shook her head quickly. "Not like this. Not when they're so close. If they see me in this form, they'll have no reason to believe you. They'll tear apart this entire ranch until they find me." He understood then. This wasn't just about a fugitive running from the law. This was about a larger threat, one that could destroy everything. The reality of the situation hit him hard. But he couldn't back out now. There was no turning back. "We need to get to the barn," Jake said, his voice firm. He grabbed her arm and started leading her through the back door. They moved as quickly and quietly as possible, trying to avoid the light coming from the ship. The night was cold, and the air felt thick with tension. They passed the empty fields, the sounds of the night, eerily quiet except for the hum of the ship in the distance. As they neared the barn, Jake's mind raced. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. He was in over his head, but there was no turning back. When they reached the barn, Jake paused. He pushed open the heavy door slowly, trying not to make a sound. Inside, the barn was dark, but the smell of hay and old wood was familiar. He motioned for the woman to follow him to the back of the barn, where a small loft was hidden. "We'll hide here," Jake said, pointing to the loft. It was the only place on the ranch that the bounty hunters wouldn't be able to easily find. But just as the woman started to climb the ladder, the sound of footsteps reached their ears. Jake's heart skipped a beat. "They're here," he muttered. The woman froze, her eyes wide with fear. "Hide, now." He quickly pulled her up into the loft and covered the entrance with some old blankets. The ship above them still hummed in the distance, and the footsteps grew louder, closer to the barn. Jake crouched low beside the woman, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Every muscle on his body was tense, and he could hear his own heart beating in his ears. There was no way of knowing how long they would have to wait, but he knew one thing. If they didn't stay hidden, they would be in even more danger. The sound of boots crunching against the gravel outside the barn made Jake's heart race. He crouched down, his hand gripping the old wooden beams of the loft as he listened. The woman beside him, her violet eyes wide with fear, held her breath. They both knew the bounty hunters were close, too close. "Stay quiet," Jake whispered, his voice barely a breath. The barn was cold, and the smell of hay mixed with the faint odor of leather and wood. It felt like hours passed in silence, though only minutes had gone by. Jake's mind raced as he thought of a way out. The ranch was surrounded by nothing but wide open space, and if they tried to run, they wouldn't get far. Their only chance was to wait, but how long could they hide? Down below, he could hear the voices of the bounty hunters as they approached the barn. There were at least 2 of them, maybe more. Their footsteps were heavy and deliberate. They were looking for something. "Someone. I know she's here," one of the men said. His voice was low but confident. "You checked the house?" "I did," another voice replied. "She's either here or she's gone to ground. We can't wait much longer." Jake swallowed hard, trying to keep his body as still as possible. His eyes flickered to the woman beside him. She had her arms wrapped around her knees, her face tense with worry. She had told him they would come, but Jake hadn't imagined the fear in her eyes would be so real. This wasn't just about hiding. It was about survival. "We should burn it down," the first voice said, louder now. "Smoke her out. She won't escape if we destroy everything." Jake's heart skipped a beat. Burn it down? That was their plan? It made sense in a way. If the bounty hunters couldn't find her, they could just destroy everything Jake had worked for. His ranch, his livelihood, gone in the blink of an eye. "We can't," the second voice protested. "What if the town gets involved?" The thought sent a chill down his spine. Red Rock was a small town, but everyone knew everyone else. And while most of the people there minded their own business, Jake had a feeling the situation was bigger than anything the town had ever seen. The woman beside him spoke up quietly, her voice trembling. "They'll do it. They don't care. They won't stop until they find me."
He had to do something.
"But what?" "Let's give it a little more time," the second man said, his tone softer now. "She has to be here. If we don't find her soon, the boss is going to come down hard on us." "Do you know who they work for?" he asked softly. She shook her head, her expression grim. "No, but they're dangerous. More dangerous than you can imagine. They'll keep coming until they have me. And if they can't get me, they'll take you too." Jake's heart pounded. The idea of these men turning their attention to him was terrifying, but he couldn't just sit and wait. Not like this. He stood up slowly, careful not to make any noise. The woman looked up at him, her eyes wide with alarm. "What are you doing?" He was thinking. There had to be something he could do, some way to buy them more time. Then he remembered the mining tunnels. The ranch had once been part of an old mining claim, and deep beneath the barn there was a network of tunnels that connected to the hills. The miners had used them to move in and out without being seen. Jake had never told anyone about them, not even the few townsfolk he considered friends. It was a long shot, but it might just work. "We're going to move," Jake said, his voice firm. "There's a way out of here." The woman didn't say anything, but she stood up and followed him without question. Jake led her down the ladder, moving quickly but carefully toward the back of the barn. The sound of the bounty hunters' voices grew louder as they circled the barn, but they were still far enough away that they hadn't reached the back. Jake pulled open a hidden trap door in the corner of the barn. The old wood creaked under his weight as he lifted it, revealing a narrow, dark passage beneath. He didn't hesitate. Without looking back, he motioned for the woman to follow. She did, her steps quick and silent as she joined him in the tunnel. The air down there was damp and musty, but it was cool and safe. The tunnels were narrow, just wide enough for one person to pass through at a time. Jake led the way, keeping his steps light. The last thing he wanted was to be caught down here, trapped with nowhere to run. As they made their way deeper into the earth, Jake's mind raced. The woman had said she was important, that the bounty hunters were after something bigger than just her. But what could it be? What was so valuable that it would bring men like these to a small ranch in the middle of nowhere? Suddenly a thought struck Jake. The technology. She had mentioned it before. Something about technology that could destroy worlds. Could she be carrying something like that? Was it possible that the bounty hunters weren't just after a fugitive, but something far more powerful? Are you carrying something? Jake asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't want to alert the bounty hunters, but he needed to know. The woman paused for a moment, her footsteps faltering. Then she spoke, her voice low and hesitant. I'm carrying a key to something that could change everything. If they get it, they'll have control over everything. Jake felt his heart sink. He had no idea what that meant, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let them have it. If the bounty hunters got their hands on whatever she was carrying, the world as he knew it could be lost. They continued through the tunnels, each step taking them farther from the ranch and deeper into the unknown. But as they moved, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just running from the bounty hunters. They were running from something much bigger. As they neared the exit of the tunnels, the woman suddenly stopped, her face pale. We can't go any further, she whispered. Jake turned to look at her. What do you mean? We're almost out. She shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. We're not alone down here. Someone else is watching. Jake froze, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle slung over his shoulder. Was it the bounty hunters? Or something else? And if it was something else, how much worse could it get? The tunnel stretched dark and narrow before them. Jake's heart thudded in his chest as he led the woman deeper, his eyes scanning every shadow, every creak in the wood above them. The weight of what they were running from and the mystery of what they were running toward made the air thick with tension. The woman walked beside him, her steps light but purposeful. Despite her fear, there was a certain calm in the way she carried herself. She knew something Jake didn't, something that kept her moving forward, even when every instinct told her to stop and hide. We're almost there, Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. His breath echoed in the narrow tunnel, and he hated how loud it sounded, how every step seemed to amplify their danger. They had to keep moving. The exit of the tunnels was near, just a few more yards to the hidden entrance behind the hills. There, they could get to the old woods, where the dense trees and undergrowth could offer them cover. Jake had lived his entire life on this land, and it had always seemed like a safe haven. But now even the familiar paths felt foreign and dangerous. Behind them, the sound of the bounty hunters grew louder. Their voices echoed faintly through the tunnels, but Jake knew they were getting closer. They couldn't outrun them much longer. Are you sure they won't find us here? Jake asked, glancing over his shoulder at the woman. He needed to know how far they could go. She nodded, though her expression was hard to read. This is the only place they can't reach. The rest of the world doesn't know about these tunnels. Jake didn't question her. There was no time to waste. If these were the only safe places to hide, he had to trust her. As they reached the end of the tunnel, Jake paused, his hand on the stone that would open the hidden passageway. The cool, damp air from the tunnel was replaced by the crisp smell of earth as he pushed the stone aside. The entrance opened into a dense thicket of trees, the thick forest stretching out in every direction. It was dark here, but the stars above provided enough light to see the path ahead. Jake stepped into the open air, his boots crunching against the dry leaves on the forest floor. He motioned for the woman to follow closely, his eyes scanning the trees, alert to every sound. They didn't have much time. He could feel the presence of the bounty hunters closing in, and there was nowhere to hide. A low mechanical hum broke the silence of the night. Jake tensed, his body frozen as he looked up. Above the trees, a sleek black ship hovered, casting a shadow over the land. Its engines glowed faintly in the dark, and Jake could see the shadowy figures moving inside. The bounty hunters were close. Too close. "They're here," the woman muttered. Her voice was strained, her grip tightening around the key she had hidden in the folds of her clothing. "We don't have much time," Jake said, his voice low. "You said this key could save us. What do we need to do?" The woman glanced at him, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and fear. "I have to get to the center of the forest. There's a place, a power source hidden deep inside. I need to unlock it. If I do, I can stop them." Jake didn't fully understand what she meant, but he didn't need to. He trusted her, and that was all that mattered now. The bounty hunters were closing in, and the only chance they had was to get to that power source. Without a word, he began to move through the woods, leading the woman toward the heart of the forest. The trees were dense, their branches intertwining to form a nearly impenetrable barrier. But Jake had lived here all his life. He knew these woods like the back of his hand. As they moved deeper into the forest, the sound of the ship's engines grew louder. Jake looked over his shoulder once more and saw the faint outline of the bounty hunter's ship descending toward the ground.
They were getting closer.
"We need to hurry," Jake said, his voice urgent. The woman nodded, her pace quickening. They were close now. Just a few more yards and they would reach the power source she had mentioned. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what this place was, but it was their last hope. They reached the center of the forest, a small clearing surrounded by ancient trees. In the middle stood a stone circle, a strange, ancient structure that looked out of place in the wild forest. The woman stopped in front of it, her hands trembling as she reached into her clothing and pulled out the key. It glowed faintly, and as she held it in the light, Jake could see the intricate markings on its surface. "This is it," she said, her voice low. "This is the key to everything." Jake didn't ask any more questions. He could hear the ship now, just above the treetops. They were running out of time. The woman placed the key into the center of the stone circle, and there was a sudden flash of light. The air seemed to vibrate around them as the ground beneath their feet hummed with energy. A soft blue glow erupted from the center of the circle, rising into the sky like a beacon. For a moment, everything went still. Jake felt a strange sensation, like the world around him was shifting. The trees seemed to sway, as if the forest itself was alive. And then the ship above them opened fire. Jake didn't hesitate. He grabbed the woman's arm and pulled her down to the ground as the first explosion shook the earth. The force of the blast sent them both tumbling, but Jake managed to keep hold of her, shielding her with his own body. The air was thick with dust and smoke filled the clearing. He barely had time to react before the bounty hunter's ship descended rapidly toward them. It hovered just above the ground, its engines blasting the trees around them, creating a chaotic swirl of debris and dust. Jake and the woman were caught in the chaos, but the power source beneath them pulsed brighter, and the strange energy in the air intensified. In that moment, the ship above them froze, its engines sputtering. The bounty hunters on board looked confused, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The woman's eyes gleamed with determination as she whispered, "It's working. The key has activated the defense system. They won't be able to reach us." Jake didn't understand how, but as he looked up at the ship, he could see the energy field surrounding it. The ship tried to fire again, but the shots deflected harmlessly against the invisible barrier. The bounty hunters shouted in frustration, but it was over. The ship began to rise, its engines sputtering and struggling to stay airborne. The energy field was too powerful. Slowly, the ship turned and flew off into the distance, leaving the two of them alone in the clearing. Jake and the woman watched as the ship disappeared into the sky. The hum of the power source faded, and the forest fell silent once again. "We did it," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned to the woman beside him, her expression one of quiet relief. She nodded, her body finally relaxing. "It's over. For now." Jake stood up, his legs shaky but firm beneath him. He glanced around the forest, his land, his home, knowing that life would never be the same. He had saved the woman, and in doing so, he had saved himself, too. Together, they had stopped something far bigger than either of them could have imagined. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. The world was changing, and the future was now uncertain. Still, as he looked at the woman standing beside him in the forest, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of hope. They had faced the impossible and won. For now, that was enough.